Hey guys, welcome back to the Seitanist Podcast. Today I'm joined by the 40-year-old vegan to talk about his experience as a slaughterhouse inspector and how he got from that point to being a vegan activist. This conversation was such a pleasure to have. There was so much information that I wasn't aware of, and I think it's so useful to have someone like David, the 40-year-old vegan, to talk about his first-hand experiences within a slaughterhouse. So, your first question, this is the one that's on everybody's mind, everybody's asking it. Are you still 40?
That's a great question, and you kind of threw me a curveball for the first one, Rhys. I'm actually 70, but I look 40. So it's sort of the benefits of going vegan and being plant-based. You actually reverse an age. So
Oh, that's interesting. I heard you deteriorate quickly when you go vegan. So
yeah, that's what they're saying. I don't know if they've got the right information, but there's only so few of us ahead of the curve. So
could you give us a little bit sort of about your past and how you went from meat eater to vegan?
yeah, so that's a bit of a journey, I guess you could say. Not that I'm a journeyer, but
I always try to avoid that word journey, but it's the most appropriate word. I don't know what we should say.
at times, right? When I grew up as a kid, I stayed at my grandparents quite often, and so they immigrated from Portugal, and they got the job that was given to them, which is working in a slaughterhouse.
Okay.
So that being said, like I idolized my grandparents and I idolized my grandfather, his work ethic, and I didn't really have a lot of ambition growing up. So when the family started working in that type of business, the writing was sort of on the wall. He went from working as a online person to actually working for the federal government. And so he kind of lived the quasi Canadian American dream, I guess you could say. He had bought 2 cars, he bought his house and had a swimming pool. So that's why I was always over there. And so I ended up, following my uncle. My aunt also worked in the industry, my mother. So it was sort of a family type thing. And so, like I said, I didn't have much ambition growing up, so the writing was more or less on the wall. So I ended up working as a federal inspector in slaughterhouses, as well as so-called processing areas, and eventually in animal health. So it took me some time. I didn't realize actually that there was such a thing as vegan. I just thought, like everyone else, we had to eat animals. And so it took me quite a while, but once I found out there was a potential, my ex-partner at the time saw that I was struggling, and she recommended we try vegetarian. So we tried that, and I didn't die. I was shocked. I thought, I thought something was going to happen to me. I literally was afraid. But like my past kind of came back to haunt me. And so I felt okay. I felt better. I didn't die. So then I thought, well, maybe I can, go. I heard of this thing vegan, but those people are crazy, right? Like you look at them, radical, extreme, crazy people. But what if I try it? And then I tried it, and I actually even felt better. Taking out dairy products. My breathing felt better. I had asthma when I was younger. Allergies were kind of dissipating, and I didn't get sick. I used to always get sick all the time, and felt once a month a cough, a cold, something like that. So it was enlightening, to say the least, and to realize that my past where had worked, and that kind of crept up later on. But that's sort of how I went from not eating animals. And there's more obviously to the background of that, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
So you said you went vegetarian to vegan. So did you know that we kill animals in dairy and egg industry because of your work in the slaughterhouse?
Yeah, I did. It was a challenge for me to even think about actually going vegetarian. So I thought that was the best chance I had at not getting sick or something, or that I thought I might be missing something. but yeah, I definitely witnessed what happens to dairy cows and pigs and chickens for sure.
So let's talk a bit more about your time in the slaughterhouse. Did you have to work your way up to that inspector position?
Yeah, so like I said, my grandfather was in, my uncle was in, so they had some fairly good connections, I guess you could say.
Mm.
And so they helped kind of get me in the door. So I didn't really need any experience or anything like that. So that's sort of what the gateway for me to get in. As far as going into it and sort of starting, it was not like what it seems at first. When you go in, you do see the trucks, you do see them in cages, and so like it's not anything that I hadn't seen, sort of like what you would see at a zoo or something like that. But
Okay.
that wasn't even my mindset going in. My mindset was, I better do good. My grandfather went out of his way, my uncle's there, and I don't want to embarrass him or anything like that. So walking onto the kill floor the first time, yes, it was hard to see, but it was more like what I would say is if you went into a butcher or like a almost even a grocery store, you would see the bodies, but it wasn't as I would say graphic, although it
Okay.
was graphic.
In
So
your mind, was it like you're seeing food at that time?
no,
Okay.
it was like, oh my gosh, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but it's like, this is how we get our food. This is how it is. So I might as well make the best of it and try to do the best job I could in a welfare type of sense. So
Mm.
um, eventually, though, I went into what they call the live receiving areas where they hang the chickens and furthermore. So walking into that, like I knew it was coming. It's almost like I stepped outside of myself when I went in, and the smell hits you right away. It's dusty, there's feathers, and you walk down, there's a conveyor belt, and there's these men dropping crates from 10 15 feet up, and they're slamming on a conveyor belt, and they're going around, and that's when people are opening the hatch and they're hanging chickens on this line. And it's so shocking, but in the back of my head it's like, this needs to be done, we have to eat, and then the family pressure as well.
Yeah.
But not to feel bad for me or anything like that. Like, I participated in it, I worked in it, so I don't expect any empathy for anybody, but I'm just sharing just so that people are aware of sort of how it goes. So that's sort of where, like, the things really got graphic for me. So that's the beginning. I generally shy away from talking too much about some of the horrors I saw, just because it does trigger me, and
Okay.
like I am seeing a specialist for that, but I don't mind sharing certain details of it for sure. I just don't know how your audience would feel as well. So
But I think mostly what's important is to find out how realistic these films like Dominion and Land of Hope and Glory are. Are they really representative of what really goes on?
yeah, so and I don't mind sharing some of the details of what I saw. So I did see, trucks run over chickens. I did see a person throw a chicken. I saw limbs get ripped off chickens.
Ooh.
So and this was fairly common. So when I would bring it to, say, a superior or someone, they would say, it's just sort of how things go, document it, and if it's really bad, then we'll move it up the chain and see if there's anything to be prosecuted. So within the confines of the law. So
Right.
when I did report those things, like in 15 years, I went to court twice, and I documented hundreds of cases, if not thousands. So it's definitely, these films are actually just the regular day to day. So, and this is what I want to impress on vegans, because I know there's an audience out there that says, oh, farms, organic, free range, free run, all of these terms, right? These marketing terms, just to make people feel better about their actions. 100%. They're all just general things that happen on farms, in slaughterhouses, there's no misrepresentation, in my opinion, whatsoever. In fact, when I worked in animal health years later, so I worked as an inspector for many years in slaughter, and then I moved outside of that and I worked in what they call processing. So I would go to plants and do exports, and it wasn't so graphic.
So
But then
this
I went
is
to
after they're killed and you're packaging them now, right?
yeah, so it would
Okay.
even be after packaging. It would just be more or less like exports, imports, and stuff like that. A few years later, after that, I was kind of like not rebellious, I guess you would say, but I would always made it a point to make sure that what I saw was represented. And I really feel like the agency that I work for is really hiding things towards the public. It's not representative of what the public thinks it is. They're also in the stakeholders game. So fast forward to my last 6 months there, I worked in a place called Animal Health. And this is where the cases of abuse in the confines of the law would come up. And I'd make sure that their inspector's notes were there, the veterinarian's notes, the photographs, the videos, and the things I saw. Like there was someone who worked there who said, don't look at the pictures and don't look at the videos. But that was my job.
Yeah.
And they put me in that role because they knew I had familiarity with it. But the things I saw, Rhys, like I can't even explain. And there were so many these poor beings, like their files are in a cabinet, buried away. They'll never see justice, is what I'm getting at. And so these are the more extreme things that people will never see. I guess you could compare, like, say, Dominion to the things I saw, and it's not even on the same level. And these are regular farms. These are all across the country. So I hope that describes the point that I'm trying to make there.
You talked about some of the horrible things that you saw, but you only went to court 2 times. So if you're comfortable with answering that, like what was so bad that it actually went to court?
Just reflecting back, I constantly, almost every day, I see flashbacks to the things I saw. So just to give a few examples, like in the wintertime, chickens would be frozen to crates.
That's a common thing.
Yeah, it's common. So in the wintertime, they'll put tarps over, and sometimes they're not tight enough, or sometimes they won't put them on, or sometimes because it's a dirty job and not a lot of people want to get dirty. Yeah, so that's the first thing I actually ever witnessed going down onto the kill floor was a chicken, half their head was frozen to a crate. And so they don't look at those types of things as a one individual being. They look at it as a percentage. So anything that would go over a certain percentage, they call them dead on arrivals, DOA.
Right.
So that's when it would trigger a further investigation. In the wintertime, when you have these cases where, they're frozen to death, or the middle ones, because the tarps are on there, they gain so much heat, they would die due to heat. And that's not including like some of the things like limbs ripping off or bruising. And you knew the farm that handled the birds were, really, really abusive with the birds. So those are a few things that definitely didn't really get called for. I remember once I counted, and I kind of went outside my job. I wasn't really supposed to be doing counting this. And then I kind of pushed it up to management, and I didn't follow the sequence of, say, you're supposed to go to the supervisor first, and then they go to the manager, then they go to the lawyers, stuff like that. I went above everybody's head, and I got reprimanded for it. So, I could have lost my job at that time for doing that. So I wasn't the only one. There was a group of us who wanted to see change. Eventual change happened, but this was, keep in mind, like a welfarist mentality.
So you were hired as an inspector by the slaughterhouse or by an outside company?
I was hired as an inspector for the Canadian government. So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So similar to other agencies across the world.
So what would be the motivation for hiding a lot of the things you saw?
If the public were to witness some of these things, obviously there would be an outcry. So it's very well masked, I think. If you take a look at Dominion, for example, if people were to actually watch what happens in their food system, they're definitely going to. It's a money's game, right? And
Yeah.
so with the high speed lines and the abuses that happen, it's just a day to day. They don't look at it as an individual or a being.
I guess the meat and dairy and egg industry is tied into the Canadian government.
Absolutely, right. It's, like I said, a stakeholders game. So you're having people working on both sides. They'll flip to one place, they'll work at another place. And these people are putting these politicians in power. So it's pretty obvious that they're going to get their way one way or another. And you even saw that with like disease, for example, like or fecal contamination. So from when I started, there was no feces or shit allowed on the birds, at all, and they would be thrown in. But the thing is, they'd be thrown into a rendering situation, so then they would go for animal feed. So they're still gaining money. So with that, they decided, well, you know what, maybe we'll just flush out this fecal contamination on this water spray bath. However, like, I don't know about you, if shit kind of like digs into a carcass, it's going to stay there. So these are the little things. And certain diseases, once for 50 years weren't allowed, all of a sudden are being allowed or okay. Certain cancers you can just cut out, or cellulitis. It used to be just a speck, and now they just cut that out. So the public's really not aware of what happens.
Can we talk about what your typical day would have looked like?
Yeah, so you form a bond with people, obviously, that you work with. And so oftentimes I'd be on a line with, and it's common. People think it's all men working in the industry. Well, on the lines, it's all ladies. It's all, I work with Portuguese and Filipino ladies, like that. That was the majority. So we'd be on the line doing our day to day, and we'd be talking. They'd be talking about their family, their kids growing up and such. And you grow a bond with these people. And unfortunately, those workers are put under such a great deal of stress. Like the inspectors, for example, would be on a line for a half an hour, and due to the lights, the sound, the overall area, we would have a half an hour off the line. Where the regular employees, they would work 2.5 hours, they'd get a 15-minute break and then back on the line. So they'd have to run upstairs, grab their coffee, and run back. And you witness these poor ladies, with carpal tunnel, shoulder issues, eye issues, and you felt for them.
Yeah, that's one of my questions, actually, about the people working there. Do you consider them victims as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly do think it is a human rights issue. We are using not only animals as non-human animals as basically machines for selfish pleasure, and then we're also forcing humans to work on these high line speeds, the lighting, the noise, and it's been shown that you're going to reduce your lifespan by working in these places, or you're going to get a serious injury. Often people working in these places also contract pathogens. So for myself, I actually had E. coli and Campylobacter right when I started. And you joke about it. The inspectors joke about you got the shits or something like that. About a month later, I ended up with a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in my lung. And that affected me for, I would say, probably about 7-8 years. Oh, wow. And that's just one anecdotal experience. These people also get the same thing. The majority of people will get Salmonella, Campylobacter. one of these pathogens, and we don't know the extent of how long that can last in somebody. Can affect their central nervous system, and definitely it does reduce their lifespan. So it's definitely a human rights issue.
And I think I know the answer to this, but why would they work there in the first place?
Yeah, so as I was saying before, so like my grandfather immigrated, and so that was the community that worked in these jobs. So his community was the Portuguese community, and they all were given that job, or they knew somebody who worked in the industry. You come to a foreign country, and it's, if you're not speaking the language, it's really hard to get a job, and they pay these employees a little bit higher than, say, minimum wage. They have families they need to care for. And then often too, like people doing some of the worst jobs that you would see are coming from like war-torn situations. The refugees, or they're coming from places of war, and they had no choice but to leave, but this was the job they were given, and so they're stuck with it. I remember one of the ladies I worked with, I said that to her. I said, why are you working here? Look at what it's doing to you. She had carpal tunnel in both wrists. She had a sore shoulder, always a smile though. And she said, I can't work anywhere else. I don't speak English. She said, it doesn't matter about my life. It matters about my daughter's and my family's life. And she basically just said her life doesn't matter, and that she's just doing it for her family, which is horrible, so sad.
So awful. So I wanted to know whether the slaughterhouse would know you were coming. Did they have time to prepare everything to look nice? And
That's funny you say that. I haven't thought about that for a while. So generally in the slaughterhouses, you would have inspectors there on site. But mostly this is just an export requirement by some foreign countries. So if there was no requirement from the exporter or the importing country, then you wouldn't have an inspector there. So yes, you would have to let them know at any given time that you would come to the facility. So we regularly, like I would regularly have audits, but we had to give them the heads up. So we would notify them before time.
how long was that?
Oh, you give them a day or two, sometimes a week. It depends, yeah. But oftentimes it was set up by management or supervisors beforehand, unless if they gave you that delegated authority. But yeah, we all thought it was the strangest thing too. So oftentimes when you were working in a facility that you went to 2 or 3 times a week, they knew you were coming, so they were generally pretty good, but you would try to sneak in just to see if you could catch them off guard, right? But some of the places, no.
I suppose in a way the idea is just to say we have an inspector.
Yeah, so I look at like the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, much like other agencies across the world, as a euphemism, something to make the public feel better about their choices, knowing that someone's there watching, what's going on, but really.
So I've also heard in the slaughterhouses there are no CCTV. Is that true?
I've heard that like in some places that they're going to that. I know that in Canada, that's not a rule now. However, even if that's the case, like let's say they do add the TVs in, you're probably just going to have it in certain points where you wouldn't see anything really that's going on. And two, who's going to monitor that? Who's going to watch 8 hours of slaughterhouse footage? I just don't see it happening. And it might be something for somebody to watch through, but I don't think it's going to be really that effective.
No, unless they release it to like animal rights activists, which I don't see happening.
No, definitely not.
So how long were you working there? Was it 20 years?
So I worked for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for 15 and a half years. Of that time, I was sick for off work for probably 3.5 years due to the pulmonary embolism multiple times. And then Yeah, so that was my time there. So it was about 6 to 8 years. It's vague. I can't remember exactly the timeline. And then there was a portion where I worked in processing that was about 3 years, and then animal health, a couple stints for a bit of time. Yeah.
So in all of that time, you would have become quite familiar with it. So do you believe that there is actually a humane way to kill?
That's funny. When I first started, I thought, this is, if as long as, we have these crates being set down, appropriately. So eventually we had two people lowering the crates instead of dropping them. We had people ensure that chickens weren't falling off the top of trucks. We had ensured people were not like birds weren't going to get run over. So there was a time there where I thought, this was the only way to do it. And if you stop the line in one certain spot, you might end up causing more harm in another spot. So really, it's a money making speed game, and you just had to mitigate it, which is brutal, right? It's awful.
So if you were to stop the line, you might have caused chickens to stay in a worse, say the boiling tank, to stay in the boiling tank for even longer.
Yes, because the stun would wear off at certain points, and sometimes the birds would be missed, and sometimes the backup person would miss the birds, or there was too many birds that were missed. So
Yeah.
definitely all these little factors happen, but it's not like you had an inspector sitting there at that specific spot. You had inspectors on the line, and then you'd have the random inspector going to these different checkpoints. But oftentimes, like when they would see you arrive, they'd be, doing their best, so to
Yeah.
say. And I guess you were asking if there's a humane way to do that. And I guess we can go back to euphemisms, right? So I would ask, how would that look? How would humane look? How does someone humanely stun and stab someone that wants to live? There's no such thing. And
Yeah.
so it's a prize word used for many people against changing and going to the right path. I was an inspector for 15 and a half years. If anybody was a meat eater, I was. I would sometimes eat meat while I was working. So if I can change, how the hell can anybody else change? Or how the heck can anybody change for that matter? It's very simple. And so, and the thing is, when I went vegan, I didn't know about science. I didn't know nothing. I took a chance. But now, obviously, I've learned that, like, I've met so many people. I've met someone who's been vegan for, I think, almost 50 years. I met Louis Guido. He's been vegan for 30 years. Like, there's a number of people that are vegan for so long, and they've only seen benefits. So it's kind of ridiculous to think that we can't evolve as a species.
And you said you were occasionally eating meat while you were working there. How does
Yeah.
that work in your mind? Did you have to purposefully compartmentalize that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you wouldn't look at the meat as a being. You would just look at it as food. And
Yeah.
I don't know how
Even
I did
after,
it.
you saw chickens with their necks slit like an hour ago.
Isn't it crazy? I know. I honestly, I reflect back and I think, where was my head at? How could I possibly? Oh, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
I imagine that was a difficult sort of process for you. So did you decide to quit the job or look for a new one first? Or
I was actually let go.
okay.
And not that I'm not really able to share too much on it, but I don't really care anymore just because I think the agency is a
It's up to you, man.
euphemism.
Whatever you're
So
comfortable with.
yeah, I don't care. So um, there's a processing facility that I saw, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 different things that were wrong. I was asked to go there because someone else wasn't there. There was no paperwork. There was nothing. I walked in and it was plus 20 something inside the processing area. And then the allergens were in the wrong spots. So like, and there's product on the floor. I guess you could call it whatever
Right.
you want, on the floor, and nothing's being done. So I complained about it. Normally, in that situation, you would just call up your supervisor and say whatever. So, but I wrote down everything that I saw, and then I complained about it. And lo and behold, about a year and a half later, I was let go, from the agency. So when I worked in the slaughterhouse, I had severe respiratory problems. So I asked to be accommodated, moved out of there. And so they moved me out. For 3 years. I was working this different job, but eventually they said, well, you don't have enough experience in this job. So they used it as a crutch to kind of say, see you later.
So what did you sort of quote unquote do wrong?
Well, I think what I did wrong is I did my job. I think, I think I did what I was paid to do. And throughout the years, we as inspectors, a number of us would report things, we would see things, and sometimes we would push it a little bit further, or we would go above superiors, or we would talk about it.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of secrecy behind all of this. I just had a flashback to one time, one day when I was working in the summer, and this was many days this happened, but this was really beyond. There was 20,000 chickens that baby chickens, 6 weeks old, and they suffered heart attacks because they were in the heat. They died from the heat. And so this was 3, 4, 5 different trucks that came on, and there's men hanging birds while standing on birds, and you couldn't tell who was alive and who was dead. And photographs were taken, bodies were taken to the necropsy area for the vet to do an examination, and we all knew why or how.
Yeah.
But at least that case went to court. But in that case, they couldn't find who was at fault. They couldn't find out if the producer was at fault, if the transporter was at fault, or the farmer was at fault. So these are the things that happen in these types of agencies, because it's much easier to close your eyes to what's going on. If this agency was transparent like the other agencies, I'm sure things would be a heck of a lot different. People would learn about what's really going on farms, at these processing facilities, with human rights, that then they might change their perspective or their mind. And I think that's where I have an advantage, where I can echo vegans and tell them my experiences. Sure, it's anecdotal, but I've spoken to other inspectors, and maybe someday they'll come forward. So that's my goal, is to open a door for people who worked in this industry to speak out.
How have your experiences affected your mental health even now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for a number of years, I buried things. I didn't know I was burying them. I didn't realize why I was really upset, or why relationships were failing, why friendships were failing, why I was shutting off. And so it took me a long time to actually, take some ownership in what I've been a part of, and learn how to deal with it. So more recently, I've come to see a therapist, and they've really helped me see things in a bit of a different perspective, which is good, because all the things I was doing was actually the wrong thing to do. So at least now I know that I kind of got to flip the script on that. So, and yeah, so it's something that'll never go away. I know that,
Yeah.
which is, part of it. But I think maybe for some weird way that I'm supposed to share this with people, and, let people know what happens. I think of my mom, who I know she definitely, we've compared dreams before of us being in a crate, and nightmares and stuff like that. So I think we really know, that it's affected us. And maybe for her, she didn't have those resources available, which, I can tell she's been affected her whole life. I think my grandmother was affected her whole life too. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I can't imagine being the one forced to do that with a knife every day, day in and day out. I've spoken with those people, and you can feel it as you're walking close to them, how down they are in life and how much they hate their lives. It's pretty awful.
I suppose a silver lining is that this fuels your activism, right?
Absolutely. So, but to be honest, that like it was like going into veganism. I didn't know I could be vegan, and then once I found out that I could, then it was like, well, I'm not going to be one of those vegans. They're crazy. They're
Yeah,
extreme.
yeah.
They go out and yell at people. They go to protest and stuff like that. I can't be like that. And I actually was surrounded by a few vegans that don't like, there's no way they'd go out to a vigil or a demo or any of the other crazy things we do. So I even bought a t-shirt, and I wish I had it with me, but it says plant-based, but if you flip it inside out, it says vegan.
Okay, yeah.
So because I didn't want to have that stereotype
Yeah, I get
wrapped
it.
around me. Vegan, oh my God, he's a vegan or something like that, right? I'm buying all the euphemisms or lies or whatever you want to call it then. So eventually I watched this speech from Amy Serrano. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She's in British Columbia, and she's incredible. So she was in a small little room. It was a crappy live stream on Facebook, and she just resonated with me. She basically said, if you're idle and you're standing there letting it happen, you're basically a part of the problem.
You're
And
complicit, right?
so
Yeah.
complicit, yeah. So it lit a fire under me, and to be honest, I don't know how many years it's been, but it's all I've done. I recently had to take I was burning out a little bit this year. I think I was burning out before, but it's definitely she helped light a fire under me, and I won't stop obviously till every cage is empty, for sure.
Did you ever let Amy know how she affected you?
I think she knows because I'm like fangirling her all the time. I'm liking her posts, and I'm like, oh
Right.
my God, Amy. We had her actually on our show, Liberation Hour Radio. It was a little show that we put together where we were interviewing people from different backgrounds, so environment, health, and animal rights. We were trying to mirror it into animal rights, just because we know people are so into health and environment and
Yeah,
stuff
use it
like
like a
that.
way in, right?
Yeah, and she was one of she might have been our first guest, or was that Jenny McQueen? I can't remember, but yeah, so I think she knows, but when I do see her eventually, I'll give her a big hug for sure.
So you said you were worried about being this crazy stereotype vegan, shouting at people, going to vigils, protesting. How much of that don't you do now?
Oh my gosh. So how much of it do I do? I would say, I'll just put it in this context. Last summer, there was 1 week where I went to do 13 events.
So, like, what kind of thing?
So I think it was, I'm gonna have to remember what they all were, but I believe I went to 4 vigils or 5. And then I think we did Anonymous for the Voiceless, Cube of Truth a few times. I can't remember what the rest are. I'll have to write it down because I've mentioned it before. But yeah, definitely all forms, all types. I know we did a vivisection demo in Toronto, African Lion Safari, sort of close to Toronto. So they have a bunch of animals from Africa that are in
Yeah.
Canada for some reason. So Marine Land, also that's another like SeaWorld type thing, and mink. So we've done a few exposés on the mink farms here in Ontario. And I can't even explain the smell and all the things we witnessed there. It was pretty awful. So always busy, my man. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. You're working so hard.
Yeah.
That's really good to hear. Do you have a regular job?
Yeah. So It's not something I really give out. Let's just say it's a desk job for a crappy agency.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, you got to live. But yeah, it seems like you're doing amazing things with the time you have got here.
Doing what I can, and I feel like, it's everyone else is doing their part and doing what they can. And I know sometimes people can't get out, but even just someone saying like you're doing a good job, like that just fuels me, so it's great to hear.
And you said you had family members who worked in the same line of work in slaughterhouses. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so my uncle, he still works as an inspector where I used to be an inspector. So he's worked there for, I think, pretty much his entire almost career there. I think he's going to retire soon. So almost 35 years
Hmm.
as an inspector. My aunt retired maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and she worked in a processing facility for Maple Leaf. And then, yeah, that was it. So my grandfather and grandmother were far removed from that. And my mom as well. She took a buyout type of thing at one point. So
Okay.
she actually rescued a few chickens off the line, because and I don't know if I've ever even told her this. She, they, the chickens that came in were like smaller because they didn't adapt to the food, so they didn't grow up the same pace as the other birds. They were actually the right size at that age. So she took a few home, and my dad said no, like you can't have them here and whatnot. So I think she ended up having to take them back, but
She tried though.
she tried though, and she knows all the ethical implications. She says I'm right, and but the thing is, like, she hasn't changed, so using excuses and saying I could be, but I'm not. And
Yeah, I go through a similar thing. My family understands, they completely agree. They know it's the right thing to do, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's being lazy or it's just more convenient to not change at all. I don't know.
yeah, I think sometimes too, the realization that you were actually a part of something so horrific.
Yeah.
Eesh.
So how do you deal with that? That the people you love and are close to you are doing this?
Yeah, it's difficult. I've had many heart to hearts, and then I've had times where I don't say anything, but then they start talking about it. I'm sure you probably get the same
Yeah.
thing. So, one thing that seemed to really work with someone I know, my friend Andrea, her boyfriend attended a Cube of Truth. And if you don't know what a Cube of Truth is, it's Anonymous for the Voiceless. It's an organization across the world. I think 600 chapters. So it's more like a theater style event where we're showcasing the animal agriculture industry. So people see the slaughter footage and it draws them in, and then we do outreach. So we got to talking, and she said her whole family is vegan actually, and her boyfriend isn't. And but he kind of gets it. He's kind of almost there. And I don't know where I heard it, so there's no way I'm going to take any credit for it. But someone had said, it's better to have somebody else do outreach with your family because there's certain biases, and you grew
Yeah.
up with them your whole life, kind of deal. And so she brought her boyfriend to the cube, and I didn't even really have to say anything, but he was watching the footage, and she was holding the slaughter footage in front of him, and it was just magical. Like he's been vegan ever since, which is great because he goes in these discords and he'll do battle with these nonsensical
Oh,
arguments.
no way.
And yeah, and so recently he did a post, well, it was a little while ago, and just it was about, I don't know, like 2 pages long about how that inspired him and how that affected him. And it just like gave me the feels. I was like, okay, that's given me enough motivation to do X and X today,
Yeah.
so we're going to go, do this campaign, that campaign. And it was great. So I think it's important maybe to have somebody outside your family, uh, a stranger more or less, to maybe do that. But Who knows, right?
I certainly agree with that. I think there's a psychological barrier there. Maybe you don't want to lose to someone you know very well. I'm not sure what it is. In Canada, you have Bill 156, otherwise known as ag-gag laws, right? I'm sure you do know much about them. Could you give us a brief overview of what that means for your activism?
For me personally, it doesn't really mean much. In Ontario, Canada, we have a creed. It's by law, so it's much like a religion. So it's sort of a fundamental right here. So that includes expression, the ability to do things that otherwise fall within that creed. I don't have the exact definition with me, but as far as Bill 156, they already have laws for trespassing. They already have laws for that type of behavior. If you were to read this bill, you would see how it really takes away from anyone in Canada's fundamental rights. You're talking about not allowing whistleblowing, which I think in all the Commonwealth countries, I think
This is
is like
Canada.
yeah, I think it's a staple, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of going backwards. And if we look at some of the ag laws in the United States, I think there was 16 states that had repealed these gag laws. So I think
Okay.
Ontario followed suit, and I was recently in discussions with a few people that are going to be repealing that. So they're going to go to court and try to dismantle it, which I think it'll happen. The penalties are so extreme. It's $20,000 for maybe somebody who saw something that happened in a farm, and they complained. They went to the right authorities, but then that farmer said, well, no, you're an animal rights activist, and that
Yeah.
now you're gonna get fined or something like that. So
So is it a way to paint animal rights activists as terrorists?
definitely extreme terrorist, whatever it is. Can you imagine someone's stealing a bunch of chickens? How extreme, how tyrannical. So back to that, but with Bill 156, so it was a day after our friend Regan Russell was ran over and killed. And so tensions were getting a little bit higher before that bill was introduced, especially at the slaughterhouse vigils that we attended. But I had never feared for my life ever stopping a truck.
Yeah.
And I've stopped many. And I just, that day, like we have different applications, and messages after messages after messages came, and I couldn't even read it. All I heard was activist was hurt or killed. And I couldn't fathom that I was going to be there that day myself. And so like I just jumped in the car and I drove there. It's about an hour away from my house. And so, I didn't know Regan that well. I met her a few times. I just remember she was very tall, her big orange sign, and her laugh, because she had told me that she had been an activist for 43 years. I'm like, 43 years? That's as long as I've been alive. How is that even possible? Just wonderful being, to be able to do that for so long, for so many years. And yeah, I mean, tensions were very high after the bill, and they even came and did a barbecue at that spot. It was just really awful. Some of the comments we were getting and stuff. Regan was 65. She was the fastest one of us, though. I'll give her that. So
Yeah.
yeah. So this bill was very farmer friendly. So the meetings they had, the consultations they had, there was no animal rights organization. SAVE wasn't there. Out of all movements, that should have been there at the very least, right? So it's kind of crazy that no animal rights group was even invited to sit at the table at dozens of meetings.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
suspicious, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about the response to what happened with Regan, both with the vegan community and the community at large?
Yeah, so I guess I have some underlying opinions, but I will keep some of those to myself. But with the response, I definitely know myself, and I definitely have met a few people that have joined the movement because of what they heard and what they witnessed, what they saw online, some of the comments that were made, just a like sheer how could this happen? How could somebody who's simply going to cherish these animals in their last few moments be treated so horribly? And so, yeah, definitely rose in the movement. Save has definitely taken on a lot of that with the marches and spreading it globally. So I don't have a lot to say about that. Mark Russell and Regan's father, exemplary people. They've been really great. I actually have a video of Regan's father. If you want to check out my channel, he has a speech for us. He came out in the wintertime, and it was the time when I believe France and Denmark, they were talking about going for free. And he was just so proud because he was arrested with his daughter, fighting some of these, he said he became the pupil, and he's like, I couldn't believe I got arrested with my daughter, and stuff like that. It's wonderful, wonderful family, So yeah, it's definitely invigorated the movement.
I did read Russell's death was cited as being one cause of a possible global decrease in meat consumption.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if you look at her story, if you look at who she was, the humanitarian she was, people resonate with people like her. She was an influencer, especially in her early days. She was definitely doing everything she could in every type of way for human rights, any rights, you name it, women's rights, all the rights she was there for. So I can definitely say that's a guarantee. She definitely did inspire people.
And how about the community at large then?
You have your group that is against animal rights activists, and they've let it be known they're the ones who really got this bill underway.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we had a vigil there. They had a counter protest there, and I was there. I have video footage from it, and it was really crazy. It was like a lot's going on. I don't even know if the Halton Regional Police even knew what to do in that situation. So many moving pieces, and they're trying to establish their own rules. And yeah, there was definitely a lot that went down at that time, and still continues. We still have the odd counter protester show up to events and say not too kind words, but again, we're nonviolent and we try to maintain our calm. And it just goes to show, we have one side that's, almost violent towards us, or has been violent towards us. Whereas, we're just there for the animals. We don't care about the truckers. We don't care about anybody else. We're there for the animals, and we want them to at least have that dignity, that last goodbye, that farewell.
So how do you deal with counter protests? Do you just ignore them? Do you address them?
I think for me, I generally myself, I mirror the conversation. So if someone's a little bit more aggressive to me, I'll be a little bit more aggressive back.
Okay.
I know that's not the typical way some deal with it, but I've worked with these people, and I feel like I can hold my own in that sense. If someone were to throw a punch at me, I'd probably take it and fall to the ground just to show how violent that industry is. But if someone's yelling at me, I will argue back. I won't, and I'll give truth to them. Like,
Yeah.
this is gas chamber, baby pigs are being sent to gas chambers here, and you're standing up for this. You're fighting us, and we're trying to stand up for this sort of deal. So, like, I'm not name calling or flipping them off or anything like
You're
that.
trying to stay
That's
within
more,
logic.
yeah. So, like, a heated argument, and another point, I do have another video where I was talking to a trucker. He said he would have ran her over too, and I said, wow, like, wow. And so if you look on my YouTube channel there, I do have a video of how I spoke to him, it was a little bit more aggressive, but I think by the end of it, I actually might have actually changed not his mind entirely, but to show him that, we're humans, we're just sticking up
Yeah.
for what we believe in, and perhaps maybe you could respect us a little bit more.
Do you remember the name of that video?
Trucker fights activist warning. It's only 57 seconds.
I will ask you some more questions, but maybe that's a good place to plug your stuff. So what is the name of your YouTube channel?
So I'm the 40-year-old vegan on YouTube. That's my Instagram handle as well as my TikTok handle. I'm on Patreon if you care to support my work. And I'm also David Magina on Facebook. Magina.
Should we have maybe 10 words or less? What do you exactly do on these platforms?
Inspiring couch potato vegans to get active.
And you got a couple words left over there, so it's very economical of you. That's really impressive. So please go and follow David. If you're listening on YouTube, everything will be in the description. If you're listening on Spotify or elsewhere, just listen to that part again and type it in. And are you working on anything at the moment?
Yeah, so if everyone wants to join a very easy, simple campaign, I've recently launched a Starbucks pressure campaign, and that's where you can find it on Facebook. Basically, we're giving a letter to Kevin Johnson, the CEO of Starbucks, to ask them when to put paper to pen or pen to paper when they're going to be animal products free or plant-based, fully plant-based. And then after that part, we'll continue the pressure upon that. So feel free to join.
I'll pop a link to that in the description too. Okay, I've got some last minute questions for you. In your experience, what is the best approach to get people on the road to veganism?
So I found, we do the cubes of truth. So obviously I think that's a very effective way. And the why is because we use the Socratic method. And so when people are discussing these things with you, I find listening to them and then asking them why questions is a very powerful way to get them to actually figure it out, as opposed to you telling them. So I think that's a very key point, them coming to the conclusion on their own.
Have you heard any new excuses lately? Have they run out of excuses now for you?
I don't know. There was one the other day and I can't remember it. It was so good. I think I'm just going to stick with though, anything though, any excuse though.
Let me tell you one of the new ones I had. It's rare you get a new one these days, but I just want to see a response to this. It doesn't matter what we do to the animals anyway, because the sun will swallow the earth in 8 billion years.
That is definitely a new one. What would my response be to that? Oh my gosh. Sorry, come again? I think that would be my response. Yeah, I don't have a response.
Make them repeat their stupidity until they
hear
it
over
themselves.
And over. Wait, I didn't hear that. What?
Okay, the last question. If any Canadians are listening right now who want to go vegan but don't really know where to start, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, you can reach out to me and I will explain to you why you should go vegan. I feel free to. I'm on Messenger, I'm on Instagram. I will give you all the reasons to. But if you can't reach out to me, or if you feel like you want to do it a different way, Challenge 22, Vegan 22 has wonderful mentors. It's free. It's a free service, and they will set you up on the road to becoming vegan. And then the only other thing I would ask of you is that you consider standing up and speaking out for those beings, because they're going through a lot. They're suffering greatly.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Seitanist Podcast. Remember, you can find David on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok by the name The 40-Year-Old Vegan. And again, he is also on Facebook at David Magina, Magina, and I believe he gave his Patreon a cheeky little plug too. So please do go follow David on all of these social medias and give him some support. He is working so hard for the animals, and I know your words of encouragement will really mean a lot to him. Thank you so much to my patrons: Katie Orange, Trash Carcass, Amy Lee, Benjamin B, Ekaterina Maranova, Luke McDonnell, Ryan Kleincourt, Vegan Yak, Matthew D, Sleeps 8, AS, Ash Q, Austin Cram, Kathy Lawrence, Con3, Davzi, and the Vegan Mooncat. Let me know if there's anyone you would like me to try to get onto the podcast, and I'll see you next time.